Have you ever wondered, what do poor people dream about? You know, growing up in the small farming community, Farmington, I quickly learned, or we had a saying, I should say, that poor people don't dream. They survive. What I mean is, we never actually thought that anything would change in our lives. You work 12 hours in the factory, and you do that your whole life like your daddy did before you. Or you plant corn morning to dusk. And I was 17 years old. I was making fence line in Farmington with my best friend on the farm. And we're talking about London. And we're both excited. And I say, Tim, someday we're going to London. And he said, maybe you will, but I won't. I'm going to die right here on this farm. Hi, I'm Josiah Cantrall. I grew up in this rural community of Farmington, Wisconsin. It's a bustling metropolitan area of cornfields, cow pastures, and John Deere tractors. And inside this big area, there's a little dot on the map called Fillmore. That's where I'm from. There's 2 bars and 1 church smack dab in the middle. I was raised there with my 13 siblings, 9 sisters. A lot of beautiful faces around the house. 9 sisters and 4 brothers. And the next closest town was a little 4-way intersection called Cheeseville. And there's still a sign there up front that says, population 22. That's where I'm from. You know, we're always poor, right? But that's not a big deal, right? A lot of people are poor. It doesn't mean you don't have a happy life. But life really changed one day. I'll never forget it. I woke up, I was about 13 years old, and my dad's car was in the driveway. And I ran upstairs, all excited. And I said, Mom, did Dad take off of work today to go play basketball with me? And she said, no. Your father has lost his job. So he spent the next 2-3 years on unemployment rolls trying to find whatever work he could to take care of the family. And I got my first real job on a local farm, shoveling cow manure, cleaning beehives, spinning wrenches on tractors. And I was proud of it, because I was becoming a man like my dad, helping take care of the family. But I always wanted something more. Not that I didn't love Farmington, but I just wanted something more than being poor. So I figured I should become rich and successful then, right? But I didn't know anybody that was rich. So I had to go find somebody to help me figure this out. So logically, I thought, I'll go wherever rich people hang out. So I went to church picnics, right? Somebody's paying for the building, right? Or local fundraisers. Somebody's got to write the check. And I tried to figure out who in the room was rich so I could talk to them, become their friend, and maybe they could help me figure this whole thing out. But I quickly noticed they all had nice clothes and suits and ties. And not only did I not have a tie, I didn't know how to tie one either. So my grandfather hooked me up with one. He tied it, put the knot in there, and I kid you not, all through high school, all through college, I never once undid that tie. Well, I didn't know how to tie it back on, you know. I just slipped the knot down gently, hang it on the wall, and when I needed it, I just put it on and put the knot back up. But there's something else, you know, we drove old, junky, rust bucket cars, and at first I parked with next to everybody else's, but then I started parking blocks away, or I'd park in the back by the kitchen help, coming through the kitchen doors, because I didn't want people to know where I came from. Because if I told them where I came from, they would instantly start treating me differently. And it wasn't even mean, it was just like all of a sudden expectations got lowered. They'd say things like, I hear, you know, machine operators make really good money these days. Or, you can make a lot of money as a mechanic. Nothing wrong with those jobs. But I didn't want that. I wanted to be a venture capitalist or go to Harvard. And so I thought, if I tell them where I come from, the opportunities in life that they'll present to me will be much lower. So I hid it, and I guess I was kind of ashamed of it. Till one day I met this man. His name was James Harris. I'll never forget it. It was at a rich community called River Hills in Wisconsin, North Shore, Lake Michigan. It's where I discovered what a coat check was, you know. What is this? And he was speaking, and he was just magnificent. He was this tall black man with smoothly shaved head. He had 2 gold earrings, big silver rings. And he had traveled all over the world. He was a speaker, TV commentator, everything. And we became friends. And he invited me on one of his trips. I'll never forget it. We're riding across Highway 94 north towards the Mississippi River. And he's playing music and bouncing, and these guys come on, and they're singing something like A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I was like, who is this? He's like, dude, come on. This is the Jackson 5. So naturally, I was like, oh, like related to Alan Jackson? He's like, no. So he introduced me to Motown that day and gave me the rich cultural music history. And then I introduced him to Alan Jackson. And so we rode on that trip, alternating songs, singing at the top of our lungs. It was a beautiful thing. Well, I kept going to places, and they invited me on this trip to go to London, to be part of an international delegation to meet the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, David Cameron, at his house in 10 Downing Street. And so I told Mr. Harris, I said, I want to go, but I'm not going. He says, what do you mean you're not going? And I was like, from Farmington. He's like, so? I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, from Farmington, and it's the dead of winter, and our front door's broke, so we keep a dresser propped up against it so the snow doesn't get in. But snow still gets in and accumulates in our foyer, and in the morning, the snow is still there because that's how cold the house is. I can't go. I have to take care of my family. He says, no, you're going. And then he said something to me that stuck with me forever. He said, I don't ever want to hear you tell me that where you come from will determine where you end up. So he helped me raise the money. I end up in London, I get a postcard, and I send it home to my best friend, Tim. Made it to London. Got home and started writing nationally. Got a column in the Washington Times. I'm 20 years old at the time. Started doing radio. And through that, I ended up getting invited onto national television. Fox Business Channel wants to send a car to Farmington to get me, with some guy named David Asman, and I don't even know who this guy is, and to this day I don't know where he is, but I'll tell you this, I heard limousine coming to Farmington, and I was like, all right. So they get me down there, and they put me in the chair, put my makeup on, and I was okay with that. I got 9 sisters. I'm like, make sure it looks good. And the bright lights are shining on me. He's like, there's been a delay, but don't worry, you can have whatever you want to drink. We'll bring you whiskey, drinks, whatever you need. Just relax. I said, I want orange juice. Because you see, I had a hard life, but my mother didn't cry much. She was a tough woman. But sometimes she would. When I was a little kid, I'd go and I'd hold her. I'd say, Mom, it's okay. Someday we're going to have enough money that we're going to drink orange juice for breakfast every morning. Because I thought only rich people drink orange juice for breakfast. So in that moment where I debuted on national television, with the lights of the cameras on me, I drank orange juice and thought of her. That appearance led to a job offer, National Coalitions Director for a presidential candidate. And I literally didn't care who he was. I just saw a ticket out of Farmington, and I took it. Headed to Washington, D.C. But before I went, I had to say goodbye to my family. Specifically, I had to say goodbye to my little sister, Hattie. She suffers from a chronic disease, Lyme disease, and she went from a track star to being bedladen. And so growing up, I'd always come and hold her after milking cows, and I'd just sit there and I'd say, someday, Hattie, I'm going to make enough money to get you better. And on this day, she cried. I said, Hattie, I have to leave home. But when I come back, I'll have that money to get you better. And so I left. A roll of summer sausage from Tommy Schwei, the local butcher, and a jar of my grandma's homemade raspberry jam. I ate that all the entire first week because I didn't realize that sometimes you actually can walk to a grocery store. I mean, this is like an all-day event if you're in Farmington, so I was like, oh gosh, I don't have a car. I can walk there. It was a wild ride. Like, I didn't even know what I was doing half the time, right? But I had dinner with Hank Williams Jr.'s agent in Nashville. Then I met Dolly Parton's agent and hung out with Alabama. Met this guy named Reggie Vincent, took me partying there. He's a member of the Hollywood Hall of Fame. He got his career started playing with John Lennon and Alice Cooper and Rachi. And I rode across Louisiana in a Secret Service motorcade. It was beautiful. And then they were looking for somebody to write speeches. I said, I'm a writer. So I sent lines off to the candidate. Next day on NBC, he's giving a speech. And I turn the TV on, and I'm like, wow, those are my words. I just wrote words for somebody that could be president of the United States. I mean, this is incredible. Kid from Farmington. I literally was just like, wow. And then 2 days later, I'm riding down to Tennessee, the campaign manager, and he says, so, I hear you got this job because your dad was a member of the George W. Bush administration. I said, no, from Farmington, right? There was this silence, and I was like, oh no. So we get down there, calls all the staffers into there, and he says, Josiah has been demoted. Make no mistake, Josiah is no longer important. And at the time, I was devastated. I just lost the biggest job of my life, not because of something I did, but because of my last name, because of who I wasn't and who my dad wasn't. But you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I learned to embrace myself, not for my name or where I came from, but because of my talents and the belief that I could get the job done. And that demotion, that firing, led to my life as an entrepreneur. Because I learned in entrepreneurship, all they really care about is, do you have an idea, and you can bring it to market and can get the job done. So now I own a sugar-free food company. And done pretty well. I actually sent some packages down to Dolly Parton, and her tour manager, agent, invited me down for the Christmas party even. And that journey of becoming an entrepreneur, of wanting to be a venture capitalist, I decided I wanted to end up as a venture capitalist. And so I spent 3 years pursuing this family. Actually, it was Sheryl Sandberg's family of Facebook. Her uncle and 2 cousins, they own a venture capital firm in Wisconsin. And I spent 3 years, literally, this is how I would do it, you know. They're part of that club. So if I go there, I might meet someone there who has an email, and then I can meet them and introduce to them. And for 3 years, I spent this maze of trying to figure out how to get to these people, and it worked. They took me out for dinner. They're an amazing family. And I said, how can I end up like you? I want to be an investor like you. I don't have any money. Is there room for talent? So he brings me down there. Take the interview. I think I have it. But I didn't get the job. And I called my old friend James Harris, and I said, you know, I didn't get the job. And it kind of reminds me when I lost that job in the presidential campaign. But this time I'm okay with it. He says, exactly. Because it's not about achieving something. And this isn't the end of the journey. Because you see, in my mind, I'd always thought, when I failed, that I failed because I failed to achieve my dreams. But really, the victory was never about arriving. It was having the courage to try and get there. It was the courage to believe that something better was out there, to be 17 years old in Farmington and say, I'm going to be there someday. That was the victory. That's the victory for you, too. It's not about arriving, achieving. It's about having the courage to get there. Because you see, it doesn't matter where we end up. It doesn't matter where I end up. All that matters is where we are going and being brave enough to try to get there. So what do you dream about? Really, like, what is that thing in your life that you want? You've thought about it lately? Because I'll tell you this, what I learned coming from Farmington, that where you come from will never determine where you end up if you don't let it. So I hope you leave here today inspired to dream again, inspired to take that step, to have the courage to believe that it's possible. Can I leave you with what I dream about lately? Is that okay? And I only do this because I hope it really helps you paint a picture in your head of where you want to be. I dream about a day where Hattie is running again. And my whole family, we're camping, because I like camping, riding down Route 66. All 14 of us kids. And at night we pitch a tent. And in the morning when the sun rises over the new horizon, I pour a glass of orange juice for my mom. And in that moment, we don't say anything at all, because we don't have to. In that moment, we know our dreams have all come true. Thank you.